Oh, hello party people. Welcome to the show. My name's Irrelevant, and today, a beat up old Traynor Voice Master, which is one of Traynor's more interesting amps, but not for the reasons you might think. So stay tuned and join us. What can I say about the Traynor Voice Master? It's a PA head. It had 4 channels, you plugged microphones into it, and it was a power amp. Almost completely useless today, or is it? Before we get started talking about this amp, let's plug into it and see how it sounds. Well, that indeed sounds very strange, considering it's a PA amplifier. What's going on with this system? Well, this particular guy is very heavily modified by me, and that's one of the reasons why the Voice Master is one of the most interesting amps that I have ever seen. It has certain qualities that differentiate it from any other Traynor head. Qualities that make it one of the most relevant Traynor heads to someone like me, and that is its general functionality and amenities. Oh boy, where do I start? Looking at the schematic, the original schematic, it's nothing special. We had 4 inputs, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, you had a very basic stage that was kind of weird because it was 470 on top with nothing on the cathode. It goes through individual volumes, then to a master volume, and then into something, a buffer stage, typical 220. So it'd be slightly more higher gain and a 1K in the bottom. Nothing special there. Then we have a treble, a bass, which goes into a buffered phase inverter, a short tail phase inverter, but it does have a presence and it does have some feedback, 22K coming from the 16 ohm tap. I suppose for some just very basic sweet cleans, it could have some application, though it doesn't have any extra features like reverb or tremolo. And then 4 inputs. Well, what good is that today? I don't know, maybe your high school jam, 1 amp, 4 guitars. Yeah, the phasing conflicts would, hilarity would ensue. But at any rate, what makes this so interesting? What makes it interesting to me? Well, let's take a look. I just noticed one thing not expressed in that schematic is the effects loop. Hold on, camera. You're not paying attention. That's right. Look at that pupper right there. Mixer out, power amp in. This pupper has an effects loop. Its inputs were at the back. All the way over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, replaced with switches. It had 4 speaker outputs right here. One of them's been replaced with a bias test point and a bias adjust. And then unlike many other Traynor amps, which I do not understand, so many Traynor amps do not have an impedance selection for the cab, but this one does. 4, 8, and 16, the full gamut. Because it had 4 channels and all the inputs were at the back, it came with many knob positions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 8 knob positions on a vintage amp. 2 pilot lights. It had the good old standby pilot light switching system. Oh, what's this? I added that, by the way. Ignore that. Stock, it has 4 preamp tube positions. 4. Most of the vintage amps have 3. Do you know what you can do with 4 preamp tube positions? Oh, maybe a 4.0 high gain circuit with a stage left over for effects loop buffering? Oh, I don't know. We gotta open up on this pupper to look a little bit deeper. And once again, I have pointed this out on other Traynor heads that I might have been working on, but the transformers, again, absolute units. They are as big as other companies' 100-watt transformers. That said, this thing being a power amplifier and not a guitar amp, well, is it quite possible that it was designed to not saturate and break up under load? Is it possible that they put even beefier transformers on this guy? Like, look at the size of this output transformer. transformer. I believe it's even bigger than the Bassmaster or the Signature that I was working on. This guy stays tight at full volume. Tight and punchy. And one time I had this set up on a buddy's Vader cab. It had so much punch, you couldn't put the head on the actual cab. It was jumping away, jumping like punch. And that's with these JJKT88s. And yes, I've tested this. It gets full power out of these two tubes, 80 watts. So you're probably noticing already, calling BS on the fact that this thing does not sound the way it should. So let's flip it over. Oh, what's all this? What's all this here? What do you think? Oh boy, there's just all sorts of everything going on in here. You see, I've modded this, and this is the reason why the Voicemaster is so very interesting. With all the facilities that it has, effects loop, 4 preamp tubes, 8 knob positions, 4 input positions, 4 speaker positions. All this means that this is the ultimate experimenter's cloner's chassis. And of course, as you can imagine, it's nowhere near as sought after as, say, a Bassmaster. Those guys are going for $1,000 now. Sometimes you can find these guys for about $500, which is still debatably more than I think they're worth. I still have the old guard mentality where I miss that I could buy them at a hawk shop all day long for $200, probably even less for a Voicemaster because it wasn't an actual guitar head. But wow. I have had so much fun with this amp over the years, and it's allowed me to check certain, boxes off my bucket list. The second clone that I ever built was in this amplifier, and it was a JCM 800. And sure enough, it sounded like a JCM 800. But the JCM 800 only needs 3 preamp tubes. So what did I end up doing with the fourth? This ancient tome of knowledge, a 1995 March issue of Guitar Player magazine that you can see has frickin' lived, bud. Here on page 91, an article called Modzilla. It starts off with some basic how to screw with your Fender modifications, but then it gets on to this guy. The JCM 800 Mega Drive project by Bruce Ignator. Well, if we are into tube amps, that's a name we've heard before. And it comes complete with a modified schematic, parts list, and over here, even a layout. This is a modification that teaches you how to add another tube to your Marshall JCM 800, adding another gain stage, converting it to a modern 4+0 circuit amp. What's a 4+0 circuit? It's 4 preamp tube gain stages to generate distortion. Mesa uses it, Soldano uses it, Friedman uses it. Anyone who builds a high gain guitar amp that can do metal distortion uses a 4+0 circuit. With some exceptions, Peavey just has a straight 6 in their 5150, and I think the Crate is a straight 5, but still a 5-stage circuit. 4+0, should I really get into it? It's 4 stages plus a cathode, a follower, but still 5 gain stages. And that makes it metal. And that's what I did to this guy. I used that extra tube position to add that extra gain stage, and I turned it into metal. But that's not even what's going on here. This modification is the proverbial monolith that inspired my monkey brain into tube modifications and tube amp design. And years later, I would continue hammering at it until finally I developed this. I call it the M80, named after this amp because it's a metal amp with 80 watts of power. There is a complete schematic going on here with, all the bells and whistles, but it really, most tube amps, the power amp and all that and power supply, it's pretty much the same. The real magic happens right here, which is my very own version of the 4+0 schematic. 1, 2, 3, 4+0. It is loosely inspired by studying Mesa, Crate, and Marshall and the Mega Drive. But one of the things that makes it special is it's absolutely simplified. Abso-positively. Like, just look at it. You check out any other amplifier schematic, there's little frickin' resistor, capacitor networks all over the place connecting these gain stages together, voicing those amps to be something in particular. This hasn't got any of that. I took the 4+0 and boiled it down to the most basic elements, creating essentially just a pure gain generator. In ways, it's not perfect for that reason. It doesn't force feed your tone. If there's anything wrong with your setup whatsoever, you're gonna sound like crap. But at the same time, it's hyper responsive to the subtleties of your tone. If you have your ducks in a row, it's pretty damn good. The only thing it's really lacking is low end and maybe slightly warmer mids. It's very bright. In retrospect, I can understand why these other amp designers put so much work into voicing their amps. This thing is so friggin' raw sounding, but at the same time, it gives it a very clean sound. And whereas you were maybe expecting more information about the Voice Master, well, this amp's not original. So, all I could do is talk to you about what I did to it. And yeah, this is all my work. There's been changes made along the way. That's one of the reasons why the power supply is just kind of I actually had this bad idea that I implemented over here where I have a 20/20/20/40 can cap and I put everything on the preamp on that one capacitor. And well, if you know anything about amp design that I didn't know back then is that you can't just share all your grounds to the same point. You gotta spread them out. At the very least, your preamp filtering needs to be grounded to the same bus as your preamp, and you're ideally better off doing that with individual capacitors. So that's an update that I since made since I originally built this thing. I've made some changes over here to, you know, the combination of the 470s and whatnot, connecting these guys together. I've been tinkering around with this a little bit lately, trying to get it ready for this video and evaluate it. And this is something that I'm going to be working more on. But for now, it's getting put onto the back burner because I have big plans. Big plans. You know, I know at least half my subscribers are here for the tube amps. The other half are here for the computers. I gotta juggle the two. But right now, one of my next big projects is gonna be inside this chassis. And the next time you see this guy, he's gonna be all gutted. And I know you might be asking yourself, wow, if you got this nice little baby project of yours, why would you gut it? Let's just say this isn't my only experimental chassis that I have. I got another one, a Traynor Custom Special. That was my first real tube head. Originally a bass amp, a man of taste at the time, I used to plug a metal Zode into it thinking, well, hey, if it could go loud like a bass, it's gonna stay clean, sound great with a distortion pedal, right? No. It was modified to begin with. I saw that as a blank check to gut it and remodify it, and I built my first ever clone into it. And what was my first tube amp clone? A Mesa dual rectifier. Yeah, my first clone. I skipped the 5E3, I skipped the 5F6A, I went straight to a Mesa dual rectifier. And well, I actually simplified it. I isolated, interpreted the switching, reverse engineered it, and I did specifically the red channel schematic. And I didn't know as much about amps back then, so it took me about 5 years to actually get it to work properly. And it sounded great, as long as you plugged a active pickup into it. I thought I had failed since it only sounded good with an active pickup, but sure enough, later on, as I got better with tube amps and people started bringing them to me to get fixed, I had a Mesa come through, just needed a retube, and I plugged into the red channel, and it sounded like my amp. Apparently I had nailed it. Turns out I preferred the sound of the orange channel. Haha, you just thought red, hey, that's gotta be the most metal. But it was on that day I understood why all the hardcore screamo kids who played dual rectifiers back then ran EMGs in all their LTDs. But I digress. I'm gonna admit this is less about the Traynor Voice Master and a little bit more about my history with tube amps. But tube tone is a dragon I've been chasing for a very long time. Specifically, metal tone. Sheer, grinding, high gain, face melting metal tone. And I've almost got it here. I put less passion into this project because after acquiring the Crate and the JCM 800, well, it became a moot point. I already had two Amazeballs amps to work with. I didn't really have to develop my own circuit anymore, and it becomes more of a because I can kind of situation. So because I can, this guy's getting gutted because I decided that, you know, between the effects loop and the fact that I already have a switching relay installed, this is the perfect canvas by which to clone a famous Marshall amp that's not the 800. I already have in my handy little piece of software here the circuit mapped out, ready to go. I'm just waiting for some parts that are already ordered to come in. And then this guy's getting an overhaul, and we're gonna have some fun. So make sure you stay tuned, especially if you like this old tube amp tomfoolery. Granted, we're moving into the future here with some of the circuits that I'm attempting, but it's fun to do it in these old chassis just to see what you can pull off. And these guys are so robust. Those transformers, holy frick, they'll knock you on your ocean. So once again, I don't know how to end these videos. Maybe I will acquire an actual voice master at some point and actually show you about it. But really, the point of this story is the Traynor voice master. If you can find one and you're an enthusiast cloner like me, hey, it's worth the investment. Assuming you don't mind the whole debauchery of gutting a classic, but really, a PA amplifier of that nature has absolutely no frigging use in today's society. But hell, it makes an amazing experimental chassis. Hote! One thing's for sure, I can definitely do better today. It's the other reason why I want to gut this.